Hey there, I'm author Sarah A. Chrisman.
I'm Gabriel Chrisman.
And today we're going to talk to you about how physical books are more important than ever in the age of the internet. Why books are more important than ever in the age of the internet. And I will let my favorite librarian start.
Yes, I am indeed a librarian. And I'll get on my librarian soapbox a little bit in this one and talk about, well, this sort of idea that a lot of people have that all information, especially all important and valid information, is online. And for one, that's not true. It's never been true, not even at the very beginning of the internet, of course, and certainly not at this point. In fact, anyone who's been looking for information online may have noticed over the last decade or two that the quality of information online has gotten steadily worse, and the amount of bad information online has gotten steadily greater, and it's been harder and harder to find things with the increase of advertising and search engines, and with the increase now of AI-generated garbage on the internet. It is increasingly difficult to find useful information, especially when you're doing real research online.
And especially more difficult to find information that's even accurate.
Right. Accurate, useful, valid, correct, anything you want to put on it that would be normally a good type of information is just harder to find, and you have to go through so much more junk in order to find it. And the reality of most people's behavior on the internet is that they don't take the time, and they don't try to really hunt out what useful information is out there, but they just simply take the results that come up first, and those tend to be advertising-based or AI-generated or just wrong. And so there is this idea that the internet was designed to transmit information to people, which is really not true. The internet is something that's sort of become the way it is through a bunch of non-intentional evolutions, and it's just what it is at this point. It's not something that was ever designed to transmit information to people for the purposes of research or for the purposes of anything like that.
Tell them about how the internet did start, because that's an interesting story.
Yeah.
We're going off on a tangent here, but it's interesting, I guarantee.
The real origins of the internet and of the TCP/IP protocol that underlies it is that it was designed by ARPA, which is a Defense Department creation, as a network that was survivable for communications in the event of a nuclear war. And so it was decentralized, and it was intended to have many different nodes so that any information that was sent out would have a good chance of getting through, even if some of those nodes were oblivion. And basically, that's the whole design that underlay the basic idea of the internet. And then, on top of that, the internet we know these days is something which then, really, when people talk about the internet, what they mean these days is the web. And the web, with its protocols, was something that was invented in the late 80s, early 90s. And it was really, at first, there to transmit or share. It's really hard to say what the purpose of the web was at the beginning.
Well, talk about your experience with the web at that point. We were quite young at this point, but he was already involved.
Yeah, I was interested in computer science from a pretty young age, and studied computer science at the university when I first went there. And there was
That's the University of Washington, by the way.
Yeah, there was a lot of excitement around the early web, but there was also a lot of lack of understanding about what it was good for. A lot of the things people were excited about were things like live webcams, and there were a lot of things like a student pointing a live webcam at a Twinkie on his dorm room shelf that was just open and sitting there so that people could watch to see how long it took for it to do anything. And the answer was it never did anything. It just looked like a Twinkie, always. But people were somehow fascinated by looking at this webcam. Anyway, there was a lot of things like that. There was a lot of confusion about sort of what is this good for. It certainly wasn't good at the beginning for selling anything, because no one would ever have entered their credit card information into a website. No one would ever have trusted the internet for that sort of thing. So it was clear it wasn't good for commercial purposes. Universities were famously bad at using it in classes in education. Honestly, I don't think we've still gotten to the point of using it well in education. And so if it's not good for education, it wasn't good for, for commerce, what really is it there for?
Maybe you should tell your story about the pizza in the internet.
Yes.
The pizza in the computer lab.
Yeah, so one thing it was sort of good for, and this is sort of an important story for me just because of my choices in life. As I said, I was in computer science. I was studying to basically be a programmer, and was 3 years into an honors computer science degree, and then I was in a computer lab late at night, as computer science majors tended to be, working on a project. There was a lot of problems with allegations of cheating in the computer science department at that time because, of course, digital information, it's very easy to copy someone else's work. And so they didn't want us students to be seen working together or talking together or really being together in any way. And so a lot of us were in this same computer lab, and we wanted to, we were hungry, we wanted to get a pizza. But of course we couldn't be seen to be talking to each other even if it was just about a pizza, because that would bring all sorts of trouble. So we were using the network basically to surreptitiously message each other to coordinate ordering a pizza. Then the pizza came and everyone sort of came over and paid their part, and then everyone distributed back to their computers to work on things without talking at all. And I sort of looked around and was just like, I really don't like this. This sort of alienated world, and I mean now that's a cliche, but in the mid-90s that was still a fairly new thing to realize, that this technology that was potentially meant to be connecting people was actually cutting people off and was just causing more problems than it was actually helping with. And so very shortly after that I dropped out from my computer science program and went to work at a bicycle shop and learned. That's an entirely different story. I ended up, however, in the long run, studying history and library science partly because of that experience in computer science and a bunch of decisions I made then about the use of technology and what it was good for in people's lives, everyday lives especially, and what it wasn't good for. And, this has been a challenging thing being a librarian in this era, because so many librarians are being pushed into saying, oh yes, all the information is now out there on the internet. But it is absolutely not true. There's a lot of good information out there on the internet, but most of it is behind paywalls. You can only get to any of that stuff through various subscriptions, most of which are too expensive for average people, and that most of which are only available through institutions like universities.
And the situation you wind up with now is the classic problem of separating the wheat from the chaff. There may be some good quality information out there, but there's also a lot of chaff. There's a lot of junk separating all of this material that you have to sift through.
An ever-increasing amount, especially with AI-generated web pages.
And that's becoming harder and harder.
Yes.
Now, when you talk about books, on the other hand, a lot of that sifting has already been pre-done for you, which is helpful.
Yes, there's a certain amount of gatekeeping that goes on with publishers and with the printers and everything, and just the effort it takes to write a book, something that is actually that sort of length and that sort of amount of work that goes into it, sifts out a lot of people who would just write useless garbage, which is, again, easy to write on the internet, especially now with electronic assistance.
Right. And a book, by its very nature, is a long format narrative, and therefore it has to follow a flow of thought, whereas random stream of consciousness 120 character bits on the internet aren't obligated to follow those same constraints.
It doesn't help. It doesn't help that a lot of people are accessing the internet through these tiny little screens, which just can't fit very much information legibly on a screen, and it just means that people consume information in tiny, tiny chunks.
And a lot of applications are intentionally, consciously designed to shorten attention spans, because that optimizes profit for the groups that are running these applications.
Whereas books are really not, as much as you might think of James Patterson and bestsellers, books are not often directly focused, especially academic books are not focused on making a profit. They're focused on transmitting information.
Right. as any writer can tell you, books don't make much of a profit.
Exactly, yes.
That's why it's important that you please buy some.
Yes.
We don't make much. It's like a quarter on each
Right.
book. And I don't mean a quarter of the price you pay, I mean like a $quarter.
Right.
So please buy some books. Anyhow.
But one of the
But
things...
books actually lengthen attention span.
Yes.
And that's very important because it's when you are able to focus on a problem, focus on a concept, focus on a goal, that you're able to then meet that goal, that you're able to solve that problem, that you actually enrich your mind. And that's not just something that I'm theorizing. The connection between reading books and lengthening your attention span, that is a very proven connection.
It
It's
also,
very long-standing.
that sort of long format way of presenting information is really key in allowing people to create networks of information within their own brain and an understanding of how facts and ideas connect to each other. That's what these long format narratives can do for you, that little pieces of information and text that really aren't connected to each other very well or very logically really don't help you to build that sort of network of thought and that understanding in your own mind.
And the narrative provided by books gives you a context for all of these philosophies and ideas that you're going to want to use to solve your problems, meet your goals. And when those philosophies and quotes are separated and divorced from their context, then they just lose meaning and they become a lot less useful.
And like a lot of information on the internet, you end up with a bunch of disconnected data, which means nothing just in and of itself. The context that's really meant to be put there by human thought and by human arrangement of information, and which makes that information coherent, is just absent most of the time, a lot of the time.
Right. And it's when we go back to a coherent narrative that we can actually take charge of our destinies again.
And again, that type of world, it still exists. Physical books are still here. They're with us from the past. They are still being published now. In fact, in increasing numbers. Just like all the information that humans create, we're increasing the amount we create of it all the time. And we encourage you guys to go out there and find everything that you can and read it.
Right. My favorite quote about this was a writer's response when someone said that physical books were dead, that they were obsolete. My favorite response to this is that physical books have been around a long time. So have sharks. They're both still around because they are very, very good at what they do, and they're not going anywhere.
Yes, and physical books are still the absolute best tool that we have, the best technology for conveying information and allowing people to build their own ideas, thoughts, and to learn.
Right. So, go out. We challenge you to
go forth and read books.
Yes, and by doing so, you will meet your goals and create a better world.
Yes.
So there you have it. Thank you for watching today. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a nice thumbs up. And remember to tell your friends about my books. Happy reading!